There are two things we're noticing a lot of people like right now: creative, sometimes film-like looks, and instant gratification. We want the photos ready to share with the world straight out of camera, and the camera companies that can give that to photographers are winning right now. Fujifilm needs no introduction in this space, but Nikon is quickly gaining ground. I've had the ZF on loan from Nikon USA for a few weeks now. Thank you very much, Nikon. And I've learned a lot about how they're incorporating recipes into some of their newer cameras. And in some ways, not always, it's better than Fujifilm. Hey everyone, I'm Chris Hagen, a video producer and photographer in Portland, Oregon, and I wanted to make this video because of a number of things I've seen just within my algorithm lately. Lots of people are debating selling their Fujifilm kits to jump on with Nikon and this ZF in particular because of its retro body and fast performance. Plenty of others are weighing their options. Do you go APS-C with a Fujifilm body or pick up the Nikon ZF for less than $2,000? A very competitive price considering the ZF is a full-frame camera. But I've also seen a lot of people unaware that Nikon has a recipe system. So in this video, we're going to highlight some of the differences between them, because I think it will give a lot of you some clarity on whether it's for you. We're talking about the differences in how you create recipes and how deep Nikon's system really goes, the shooting experience with them, how to save these recipes to your camera, and most importantly, how the images look with these recipes straight out of camera. Real quick though, the first thing that's interesting is something that Omar Gonzalez brought up on his channel and is hands-on with the recently announced Fujifilm X-E5. Within that camera, Fujifilm has included the word recipe within the menu system, which is a first as far as I know. Users have referred to the settings used to create the custom looks as recipes for a while now, but never Fujifilm themselves. And maybe it is because they saw Nikon enter the recipe game and using that word to refer to the system they have going and thought, wait a minute, we better start embracing this a little bit harder. So is it a rivalry? Not to me, mainly because they are very different systems outside of one area, and we're going to talk about all of it. So the only thing that Nikon and Fujifilm systems really have in common is their studio apps. Fujifilm has the Fuji X Raw Studio, Nikon has their NX Studio. They can both be used to create recipes, test them on photos, and then save for use on your JPEG straight out of camera. The functionality for both apps is a little bit slower than I'd like, but it is stable. I haven't experienced crashes or anything with either of them. It just takes a second for the changes to show up on your images. But then Nikon and Fujifilm immediately go their separate ways in terms of functionality when it comes to creating recipes. With Fujifilm, you don't have to create recipes within their studio app. You can enter the settings on your camera by hand. But the reason you can do that is because with Fujifilm's built-in film simulations like Classic Chrome and Astia and Classic Negative, etc., I'd say you're at least 60 or 70% of the way there in terms of your overall look. Yes, your white balance and tint, tone curve, grain, and some other settings will put the finishing touches on it, and they're important, but the simulations have such a strong profile of their own that it's already a pretty stylized base. With Nikon, you can play with some of their pre-made camera profiles. Take Rich Tone Portrait, for example. It's great for vibrant colors that don't overdo it, and within the Nikon NX Studio, I can adjust the basics of the Rich Tone Portrait setting, like sharpening, contrast, saturation, tone curve, and a few other things. And if you're a fan of this profile, or some of the others built into the camera, this is a great place to further craft these looks. But it is limited compared to what comes next. To really create a recipe that could rival Fujifilm, you need to use the flexible colors profile, and it is deep. Like, it's almost too much, and if you're not careful, you can probably take things a little bit too far. But if you take the time to learn and experiment, it is incredibly rewarding. Within the flexible color profile, you get Lightroom level control over your images. It starts with the basics: contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, saturation, but then you get to the color blender, similar to the color mix you get in Lightroom. This is where you can take your greens and push them toward blue to cool them off. You can desaturate your blues for skies. You can find the right balance of reds and oranges for clean skin tones. It's complete control over your colors. Then you've got color grading if you want to shift the colors in the shadows, midtones, or highlights. Then white balance. It would be nice to see adding grain as an option just for a little bit of texture, but besides that, you really can't ask for much more in terms of control. I spent hours one night doing my best to create a kind of portrait look for daylight shooting, and I really like what I've been able to get straight out of camera a lot. Certainly enough to share casual photos or send quick family photos to the grandparents that just can't get enough. But I'll reiterate, what's most special about Nikon is the ability to be flexible with the individual colors. I think if really dialed in well, you can create recipes that work in a variety of conditions a little bit easier, as in they perform well and give you the look you're going for in a number of different white balance settings and don't depend on a particular white balance to get a warmer or cooler look. For example, some of the portrait recipes created for Fujifilm rely on a specific white balance and heavy tint adjustment, which often only work well outdoors on sunny days. With Nikon, it doesn't have to be that way since you can use the color grading panel and set your shadows to lean one way, midtones to lean another, and highlights another, no matter what the white balance is, at least to a certain extent. And we'll talk about color a little bit more in a few minutes when we get to image results. Now, what's also nice is when you shoot with a recipe, let's say it's someone's you've downloaded and imported to your camera, which we'll get to in just a second, you can then come into the NX Studio and see what they did with that recipe and then make your own little tweaks. It's already leading to a great community for sharing recipes and generating a lot of positive buzz for Nikon and this imaging cloud imaging recipe system. So, saving recipes to your camera. First off, you need to create a Nikon account, and I'd highly recommend connecting your cloud account to your camera because it will make adding recipes so much easier, especially the ones from Nikon creators that are available on their website. So let's start there. Within the imaging cloud, you'll find Nikon recipes and a pretty big list of creators and the recipes they've created. Select the creator, then select their recipe to check out the look. You can also check out a few of the basic settings and photo metadata from the sample image. If you like it, you click Add to Saved Recipes. Then go to your saved recipes and scroll down, and you'll see an option to register this recipe on your camera. And there's my Nikon ZF. Check the box and you're done here. You can also add multiple recipes to the camera at once by selecting them and clicking the Batch Operation drop-down menu. Now, I go to my camera, go to the photo shooting menu, head to Set Picture Control, head down to where you see Cloud Picture Control, and select Add Cloud Picture Control Files. In just a matter of seconds, maybe even less, my list is updated and they're all available to use on camera. Getting file from other users is just as simple, but it's done via SD card. Add the downloaded MP3 file to your SD card, then when the card's in the camera, head to that same photo shooting menu, then manage picture control, then load/save, and then copy to camera. And what's also nice is there's plenty of space for recipes within this camera. You've actually got separated sections to hold up to, I think, 8 or 9 recipes that you download as MP3 files. And then you've got another, I think, 8 or 9 that are for the cloud downloaded recipes. The irony when compared to Fujifilm is I've seen Fujifilm users complain that recipes on that system should be downloadable instead of having to enter them in camera. And I've seen Nikon shooters upset that to make changes to the recipe, they have to be done on a computer and can't be made on the go in camera. But I do think Fujifilm and Nikon have it right the way they have it implemented right now. Nikon's flexible color profile is just way too involved to be able to make changes in camera. And Fujifilm's are simple enough in a good way to be able to quickly make changes on the go. So, I don't know, I just like it as is. As far as shooting with the recipes, the same rules apply. The recipe will be baked into the JPEG, but your RAW file remains raw and fully editable, if that's a word, after the fact. But your imaging recipe is linked to the RAW file. So if you open it up in the NX Studio, you can make some tweaks to that recipe. This is great for taking a recipe that's like 95% of where you want it to be and getting it to the finish line that way, then saving it to the camera and being able to use your perfected recipe in the future. Still, I always shoot RAW plus JPEG because 1, those RAW files can be a lifesaver if lighting quickly changes on you, and 2, I'm really trying to just be a little bit more intentional with some of my photos as I continue working on my portfolio. So that means being able to enhance the RAW files beyond what the JPEG processing can do, even though the JPEG processing from both of these systems, Nikon and Fujifilm, is excellent. Shooting RAW plus JPEG actually did save me when I first experimented with my own recipe. I was lacking a bit of contrast and didn't quite love the look for the set of photos I made, so I went the Lightroom route instead to dial everything in how I liked. What's also nice about the ZF is how fast it is. There's a lot that goes into the recipe in terms of color shifts, adjustments to contrast, and more, including clarity. And you know, if you've ever shot Fujifilm, that when you adjust that clarity setting, the camera has to pause for a few seconds to process every single photo snapped. There's no such thing with Nikon. There's no change to the shooting and processing speeds, regardless of the recipe you're using. Which brings us to results. And here's what I need to say about comparing results from Fujifilm and Nikon. And this is opinion, so please try not to kill me in the comments. I think that how we word things creates unfair or misleading expectations on all sides. There are film recipes designed to look like film, and Fujifilm has film simulations that help get you there. Nikon, on the other hand, has imaging recipes. I think you can get close to film-like hues and saturation and a tone curve to create a film-like contrast, but you don't get that film texture. And I think the colors do look a little bit more modern and digital and just sharp and clean, and maybe that's just the recipes available, maybe that's me not dialing in my own quite how I like, but it's just not film looking to me. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It allows you to get colors straight out of camera that are unique and clean, and I absolutely love the photos I've made, especially considering these haven't been touched at all in post. They just don't really look like film to me and have that kind of film texture, as I keep saying. That could also be a result of the 40mm f2 lens I've been using. I think some of the manual lenses I've seen paired with the Nikon ZF may have a little bit more character. But then you've got to ask yourself, do Fujifilm's JPEGs look like film? I think they look closer. Some recipes that try to replicate specific films are better than others. You do get a few choices in how grain is implemented, so there's more texture. I'll also say, and this is my own recent revelation, trying to emulate specific films through JPEG shooting is tough. With Fujifilm's colors, you can create film-like colors, and that is pretty unique to them. But I still think the best way to get a film look out of your digital photo, especially if you're trying to copy a specific one like a Portra 400 or an Ultramax or something like that, it just takes a little bit more work in Lightroom. I saw Gerard Needham do a video recently that was an excellent explainer for how to create a film look in Lightroom. I'll link that below. I'll also quickly plug the presets that I use from Caleb Salvadori. His film collection gives you a ton of different film presets to choose from and a lot of tools to use with them. Image borders, realistic light leaks, expired film looks, different grain patterns for different ISO values. The list goes on. They're hands down the best film presets that I've used and pretty much the main presets I've used lately if I'm going for that look. Back to the topic though, when it comes to results, this is why I say it's so hard to compare this Nikon system to Fujifilm's, because truly it's apples and oranges. I love that Fujifilm is using real film inspired looks with the hardwired film simulations. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of trying to create a certain look. You know, Velvia is going to be super saturated. You know, classic chrome is going to be a little bit more muted. You just know your starting point and you can create recipes a lot faster. And like I said before, their color colors are just truly unique. It took stepping away from my X100 VI for a few weeks and then coming back to really have that sink back in. Nikon's disadvantage is that you really have to dive into a lot of the settings and make a lot of adjustments if you want to push a certain look, and especially if you want to try to push the colors to emulate film, and it takes a little bit of trial and error. But the advantage is when you get the hang of it, you can push things even further and get really unique images. With Fujifilm, because trendy photo styles tend to circulate like fashion sometimes, you end up with a ton of classic chrome and classic negative looks. Now, I'm not knocking these recipes at all because, as I've talked about in other videos, they're great and make using the camera so much fun, and a lot of my favorite recipes that I use are classic chrome and classic negative based. But you do start to see a similar pattern. Popular film simulation, add a warm tint to the white balance, plus 2 to 4 red, minus 4 to 6 blue, bring down the highlights. I think it just keeps us repeating some of the same looks with small changes here or there. Again, not a bad thing, just something I've noticed. Lighting, composition, everything else, that's what's gonna make your photos stand out. With Nikon, what I noticed about their list of creators' recipes was how different they all are in terms of contrast and saturation and individual colors. And there are also a ton of great recipes I like from users that have shared them on social media as well. I'll link some of my favorite resources for recipes and creators below. Bottom line, all cameras, especially modern cameras, can get you a great image. And a lot of what makes a great shot goes beyond a recipe, like I just said. With these two systems, your straight out of camera looks will probably come out a bit different, but it's all about what you prefer. Clearly, when you look across the social media landscape, both the Nikon and Fujifilm systems, and obviously plenty of others, are capable of creating stunning images. Not to mention, once you start editing the photos, those differences can really start to disappear. You can turn your raw image into a classic film look, or take a more modern approach, or do whatever you want. And on that note, before I get to my favorite recipes, I have to remind everyone, myself included, that this is all subjective. And more important than any recipe is going to be, like I just said, lighting, composition, all the foundational elements of photography. Rarely, if ever, has a recipe saved an image from bad lighting. As for some of my favorites, hands down, my top recipe from Nikon's creators that can be downloaded from their site is negative film. It's great in a lot of scenarios, but I really loved it during an overcast walk around my neighborhood. I set the white balance to cloudy and just snapped away and loved the photos I created, following a bit of a classic car theme. It also performed well at noon in a lot of direct sunlight during a trip to the farmer's market. Again, I prefer to shoot during daylight at a locked white balance, so instead of using auto white balance, these are set to 5500. Vintage Mellow was another fun recipe. I didn't love it as much in overcast weather, but it really shined when the sun came out to play. There's some interesting green in the shadows, but it's still pretty punchy and colorful. Nature was another Nikon recipe that I used a little bit during a short hike. It was, as the name implies, pretty natural. I feel like what I saw is exactly what the camera gave me, for better or worse, without a ton of creative color. But I guess that kind of works for the great outdoors, and it is natural. Also, I'm clearly not a landscape photographer and kind of struggle when there's not really a clear subject, so if you have tips, I'd love to hear them in the comments. As for the recipes created by users not on Nikon's website database, Film Stills Portra is excellent. I'm a big fan of the cool greens, and skin tones are pretty dialed in. Serban JPG also has a trio of modern chrome recipes, as well as his modern Kodachrome recipe, which I've used a good bit. I think it delivers the right bit of contrast and punch and pretty good skin tones. And his Superia Premium 400 is also one worth trying, especially if you're a fan of cooler greens. I think it would also be pretty cool in sports stadiums. Finally, I've got my own recipe. I'm calling it PDX Portra, and I'm gonna make it available for a free download. If you don't see it in the description right now, I'm working on it, so just check back. But I tried to chase a Portra 400 tone with it. I think it works really well in daylight settings, and I think as long as you aren't too underexposed, skin tones do look pretty good with it. And really, anywhere that has some good natural light is gonna make it shine. Now, a few things worth noting before you go. One thing you cannot duplicate across these two recipe systems is the format. Fujifilm's APS-C against Nikon's full frame. Objectively, that's an advantage for Nikon. And for anyone that's considered Fujifilm but just couldn't pull the trigger because they are dead set on full frame, Nikon's got a great option here. I have no real issue shooting APS-C casually, but sometimes when you want the subject to really pop out, a full frame camera and fast prime lens is going to get it done better than most crop sensor options. Also, know that black and white recipes are a thing too, and I've actually found them so simple to use that I make all of those settings changes within the camera. I like the default monochrome a lot, but you can add color filters as well. From there, I usually just change the contrast and sharpening a bit. I'd also recommend turning off the high ISO noise reduction. The natural noise out of the ZF is a nice little touch for a bit of character in your black and white shots. Back to color recipes. Pro tip, for the ones you get off of Nikon's website, a lot of them call for auto white balance, but I've found that shooting in auto white balance does cause some pretty noticeable shifts if the lighting in your environment changes just slightly from 1 second to another. Like, I snapped back-to-back shots like really quick and have seen significant shifts in the white balance. Especially shooting outdoors, I just try to lock it in to something like 55 or 5600 for daylight. And finally, in terms of recipe creation and tweaking, contrast values seem really different from any other editing software I've used. I hardly ever push the contrast slider for color edits in Lightroom. Usually it's in the negatives or around 0. But within the NX Studio, I've been pushing it up to like plus 60 and beyond. If I did that in Lightroom, the image would look crazy. So even if you don't like a lot of contrast in your photos, don't be afraid to boost it a little bit if you feel like it's lacking in any recipes you've created or any recipes that you're tweaking. Overall, this recipe system, along with the Nikon ZF, make it feel like a camera that is the best of all worlds. It's got the speed and autofocus of modern mirrorless with the looks of a retro camera. And most important, the files are phenomenal. There is so much to get to when it comes to using it. I know a lot of you ask yourself the question, do I switch from Fujifilm to Nikon? I'd love to help answer any questions you may have about that in future videos. So let me know what you want to see and let me know if I left anything out when it comes to these recipe systems or anything that you've discovered as well. Thanks as always for taking this probably very long journey with me, and I'll see you next time.